One of the most valuable things about the human experience is exposing yourself to views that you don't agree with. January of 2023, I read an article about an activist named Jerry Martin, who said that he was going to open up a store for harm reduction initiatives that would sell hard drugs, things like cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, MDMA, to combat the overdose crisis in Vancouver. He would sell a tested supply of these things to people so that people weren't getting contaminated drugs. And he had a history of his brothers both died to drug-related deaths. And when I read an article about that, I realized that there would be a pretty fascinating film to tell this story. Asked Max if he would be willing to come up and join me, because we worked on stuff in the past in film school. He's a big collaborator of mine. Asked him if he'd come up for a few weeks and shoot this short documentary. And then we'd get it done in time for festival submissions in spring. And 3.5 years later, we have a feature film. We definitely researched a lot of the contextual stuff about the crisis worldwide and about the war on drugs in America and throughout the world, for sure. This is something that I've been interested in for a long time prior to making this film. So some of the knowledge I had, some of the knowledge we did, some of the knowledge was acquired when we were doing research for this film. But we decided ultimately to focus on a story specifically in Vancouver to keep it small and contained. I'm a big believer in, the smaller the scope is and the more personal you kind of set it around a particular person, the bigger the message can be, rather than having a really broad scope about many different things. And we wanted to tell the story that's happening in our city as well, which we think is ultimately relevant to the rest of the world as well. Pretty much both of them agreed right away. They took a couple of days to kind of think it over, but pretty much both of them agreed right away to do this film. They've never had documentaries made about them before. Both of them have been in the media quite a lot throughout their careers, but they've never had a film made about them. But I wouldn't say it was a difficult process really acquiring the access. What was maybe more difficult over time is building the trust and having the people open up to you in a way beyond just having this media trained version of themselves. But yeah, it took definitely less time than maybe some people take to get access to their participants, I guess.
And has Dana seen the film, right?
He has, yeah. He watched it a little bit before coming here to Hot Dogs. Yeah, he watched it. What was his reaction? He thought it was a good film. I think because we filmed for over 3 years, we filmed many different things and talked about many different subjects that he's been involved with over his 30+ years of doing activism. So he didn't quite know exactly what was the scope that we ultimately decided to focus on, and which parts of the story that we left in and which parts of the stories we left out. And I didn't want to tell it to him because I wanted him to see it for the first time and really get his takeaway from it naturally. But he enjoyed it. He said we did a great job, and a lot of the moments were touching for him. Him and a few other people that are in the film watched it as well together. Yeah, it's to me ultimately that's in many ways some of the most important audience reactions is from the people that are in the film, because it's ultimately their story that we're trying to tell, and we wanted to do it in the most genuine way possible, right?
And I'd say definitely. I would say when I first started making this film, I think I had a lot of ideas about the way that society needed to approach this problem and remedy the issue. And I think with many things, the more I looked into it, the more I really saw that oh, this issue is very complicated. I'm not really sure what the correct solution is. And even though I felt I was not maybe an expert, but more knowledgeable than the average person on the street, I needed to do more reflection in myself. And I still think to this day, I'm thinking about the correct answer.
Yeah, I think because this was a subject that I was very interested in for many years prior to making this film, I definitely had a lot of opinions that are already formed before about the subject, and in a lot of ways, some of them were strengthened, and some of them I caught myself thinking, like, was I thinking about this the right way? Were my opinions on the matter ultimately as concrete as I thought they were? Because when you're hearing stories from people and seeing things happen in the film that they do, I'm not sure if you've seen the film or not yet, but I'm not gonna give away too much stuff, but when certain things happen in the film that are quite difficult to process, it definitely shifts your perspective in different ways. But yeah, I think I also came away from it with a more nuanced approach.
Yeah, I mean, and if I may add, like, I think, you know, people who have experience, like, with this space, like, they often have a heavy trauma that's associated with their, you know, with what their opinion is and with their, you know, so I think everyone has a valid, you know, take on what should happen. And, like, this is why we want to, like, engage conversation and really, like, you know, encourage people to talk about this stuff, because it is, you know, heavy stuff, but it's a super necessary conversation to have.
Because of the way that this film initially got started, where we had Jerry's store was supposed to open weeks after we initiated essentially just even the development process. So a lot of it was just reaching out to family members and reaching out to people like that to say, okay, we need to acquire gear. We need to, like, shoot immediately. So a lot of it was bootstrapped in a way, and that's how we carried through the end of the production. It was largely self-financed. It was financed by family members. It was financed by people that we knew that were passionate about the subject. No grants were involved, no production companies or financing companies. I think this is also our first documentary, and we're learning about the way that everything works in terms of even just, like, financing a film. It's not something that they teach you a lot about in film school, unfortunately. Not to throw shade at our film school. We love our film school. They were amazing at teaching us everything that we know. But it's definitely something that you learn on the job, and we're gonna take into our next project. Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways it was an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time, but, you know, due to us not having a lot of resources to make this film, it was largely us two filming the whole time. Sometimes it was just me. Max lives down in the States. He's a dual Canadian and American citizen, but he spends most of his time down in the States. So for some of the filming was done just by me. So it can be challenging for sure when you're the only person there, or one of the only two people there, when you're handling release forms and sound and filming and direction and all of that stuff by yourself. So it can be challenging because a lot of stuff gets missed or overlooked. But that being said, if we had a lot of people there, if we had a bigger crew, I don't think that would have helped with the intimacy that we managed to build with our subjects. So I think, you know, we came into this with what we had, and I think we made the best of it in many ways, and it is better than maybe it would have been if we had everything to work with, like all the tools imaginable and all the resources imaginable. But I don't know if you want to speak more to that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think that's, you know, we always, you know, once we kind of developed the idea a bit more with Dana, especially wanted to give people kind of like a fly on the wall, like kind of, you know, look at things, and we thought that was like really important. So like, I do think that is a little bit easier when, you know, it's just two guys or one guy and you kind of feel like, oh, like you're standing in the room from that, you know, point of view, versus, you know, if you have like a 6 different camera, a bunch of cutaways from like the ceiling and all that stuff. So it did work out, I think.
Yeah, it's already difficult when people are, there's a stigma that exists around drugs, right? And when people are already very sensitive about how they might be seen by someone entering a store like that, just in general, or people that might know that they do these things. And being there with a camera is definitely can make people a little bit apprehensive about these things. But, you know, we were always very clear with everybody that appeared in the film that, listen, like, you're gonna appear in the film only if you wanna appear in the film. There's nothing that that we're gonna try to do to harm anyone and harm anyone's reputation or career.
You know, really just trying to capture like things as they happen, and if you want to be in it, like, you're welcome to, and if not, obviously we'll not include you. And that was kind of like the MO we used kind of throughout the whole process of filming, I would say.
Yeah, but being just two people with a camera is definitely, it helps with the situation of making feel people a bit more comfortable with the already uncomfortable situation of a camera being present. At the time when we were filming versus like when we were in post-production, and obviously we're licensing materials and things like that, like ultimately these organizations become aware of the project and like the scope of it, for sure. Yeah, like a lot of the people, we tried to get a perspective from the other side of the argument, and we have other perspectives in the film, right? There were organizations that we reached out to that ultimately did not want to be in the film, unfortunately. But I think we maximized of having this film be a conversation, which we want this film to start conversations. We want this film to people come away from this with knowing about a different perspective that exists maybe on this issue, and for people to talk to other people that have seen this film. And ultimately to do that, we had to have the film be a conversation in and of itself. So we had to include things like that, and I think it made the film only stronger. The first thing that we told ourselves is we want to really tie in everybody that's in the film, or at least do our best to tie every person that appears in the film directly to our main character. Because we, again, like when we started off talking about like the scope and like researching things beyond just what's happening in Vancouver, we decided that we want to make this contained story. So we wanted to feel that every person that appears in this film has a direct relationship with one another in one way or another. So that was the limit that we set to ourselves. So that obviously limited the amount of people that could have been in the film. And like I said in the previous answer, some of the people that we reached out to did not want to be in it, and the people that did want to be in it, we included. Yes, currently the center is closed, and Dana is looking to reopen it as soon as possible. It's very difficult to run a center like that. From my understanding, it takes a lot of resources, and that is largely coming from internally, from within Dana's organization. And I guess when you operate things like that, things can go wrong. And
I mean, yeah, it speaks to kind of, I think, part of the, like our film, like obviously the law is a threat, and like the government in terms of shutting Dana down, but there's a lot of threats to like, his life-saving work. And like, I think that's something that people need to keep in mind, like, why, these things need to be talked about more, and these ideas need to be discussed about more, because like, if Dana goes down, like who else is doing this stuff, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I think that's a really important, thing to think about.
I think in a lot of ways, we are having more conversations about it than we've had ever before, globally. Down in the United States and in Canada, locally within BC, the pilot program with decriminalization that actually started right when we started the production of this film. It was kind of tied into why Jerry wanted to open the store, because he wanted to open it in time for when decriminalization first rolled out on the first day. It ultimately didn't happen right then and there, but yeah, I mean, I think that I am hopeful that conversations continue, and we would like our film to be a part of that conversation, and hopefully encourage more thought and more understanding into the matter and more conversations, and just really we want to ask more questions for people.
Yeah, and I'd say like just to add on like a productive conversation, because I think like, in our society, like the wheels kind of turn, and nothing really happens like in a lot of governments. They're like big and bureaucratic and stuff, and so that's one thing, is not, making productive conversation that can actually initiate, some sort of change.
Yeah, there's definitely the film is definitely gonna play in Vancouver at some point. You know, we're very excited about other opportunities that are coming up on the horizon to screen the film. Obviously, a local premiere for us is very important because this is a Vancouver story that directly affects people that live there. You know, we're definitely gonna have a screening there at some point.
Yeah.
I can't talk
Figuring out
too
when,
much
yeah.
about anything, but you know, I promise you the film will play there for sure.
Well, I mean, I think for me, like, you know, people, whether you're like on one side of the fence or the other, I think people can recognize like the status quo is not a very good way of doing things. I mean, here in Toronto where we're talking right now, I mean, you can see there's people that are, you know, lying down on the sidewalk and not living in a very good state. So, you know, I think that everyone in their own way wants to help. And I totally understand that, you know, and like no one, I think, really walks around with an opinion that it really is trying to hurt somebody. But I do want them to start, you know, thinking about things more like empathetically and open-minded from the other perspective. You know, everybody should, because I think that's really the true way that like we're gonna find like a path forward, is kind of stop being so polarized on the issue and find a more consolidated path, you know, societally.
Yeah, I think it's really, you know, one of the most valuable things about the human experience is exposing yourself to views that you don't agree with. I think everybody benefits from that. I think people that agree with a lot of what Dana does would benefit from hearing the other side too, right? I think that that's really the reason that we made this film, is for people to hear the other perspective and to really maybe get an understanding of the reasoning behind what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing. Because, you know, when you first hear about it, it might seem kind of crazy what's happening there, and maybe like what Dana's doing or what Jerry was doing and things like that, for people that are maybe not from Vancouver, or people that, like you said, have a very different stance on this thing. But I think we just wanted to give an opportunity for people to consider the other side and really just engage in a conversation, because the way that overall the global polarization that's been happening in any discourse, political discourse, discourse on the war on drugs, it's not productive. And I think that we just wanted for our film to be a part of the conversation that bridges the gap and maybe brings forward some solutions that can help this crisis that has taken so many lives in Canada and so many lives in the US and so many lives around the world.